5 greyhounds were found at a mass burial site near Bundaberg in Queensland. Now allegations of other mass greyhound graves are emerging from New South Wales. Police in Queensland said the Bundaberg discovery is just the tip of the iceberg. And as Sarah McVie reports, this alarming development comes after the revelation 7 weeks ago that greyhound trainers were using live rabbits, pigs and possums as live bait to train their dogs.
Shaking, ears pinned back in fear, the defenceless animal is about to be fed alive to the dogs.
Squealing animals, defenceless and in pain, are mauled to death by greyhounds.
Hopeless, dangling, twitching.
The possum is flung around a track until it snaps in half, attached to the lure only by its spinal cord. These are just some of the shocking scenes uncovered by Four Corners' investigation into live baiting and animal mistreatment in the greyhound industry.
Putting together animals, gambling and prize purses is a toxic mix that is capable of turning men into monsters.
The fallout has been massive. In the weeks following, 5 state governments announced inquiries. The boards of Racing New South Wales and Racing Victoria were asked to resign, and dozens of trainers across the country were stood down. In Queensland, the police and RSPCA set up a special task force to investigate the industry. Last week, 55 greyhounds were found dead in a mass grave near Bundaberg in Queensland.
What I believe has happened here has been the mass murder of 55 greyhounds outside of Bundaberg.
Queensland's Police Minister Joanne Miller.
The people who have perpetrated this crime, to me, are oxygen thieves, they are cowards, and they are pathetic.
It appears it may be a common knowledge dumping ground.
Detective Superintendent Mark Ainsworth said 22 cartridge shells were also found in the area and that the dogs found seem to have been left there at different times.
Some of the greyhounds are in different states of decay, and that would sort of indicate to us that they've been dumped there over varying periods of time.
By the end of the week, a 71-year-old man and a 64-year-old woman who trains greyhounds had been charged with unlawful possession of a firearm. The woman had also been charged with obstructing police. Queensland Police told Hack they couldn't comment on this case because it's before the courts, but said that since February, 11 people have been charged with 39 offences involving animal cruelty. Now allegations have emerged of another mass grave, this time in New South Wales Hunter Valley. New South Wales Police told Hack they are investigating but wouldn't comment further.
We recorded many trainers talking about killing their dogs, getting rid of them, shooting them, bashing them in the head.
Caro Meldrum-Henner is the Four Corners journalist who exposed the greyhound industry. She says killing dogs is common.
The estimates are around 17,000 to 20,000 per year.
And brutal.
We got information about how dogs had been found in a tip with their ears cut off. Some of these dogs were still alive. They'd just been dumped there and their ears were cut off because the microchip, the identifying features of the dog are in its ear, the chip, and that chip leads back to the trainer and the owner.
And a woman on the Central Coast has urged police to reopen another investigation into a mass grave she found on her property almost 20 years ago. Caro says we're going to see even more mass graves uncovered.
This is the tip of the iceberg. As the authorities in Queensland have said after the discovery of the Bundaberg mass graves, this is the tip of the iceberg. We haven't seen anything yet.
You're listening to Hack on Triple J with Tom Tilley.
That was Caro Meldrum-Henner, Four Corners reporter, ending Sarah McVie's report. And to try and find out how widespread this practice of mass killing is and why it's happening, we have Chay Neal with us. He's the president of Animal Liberation Qld, and that's the organisation that first collected the footage of live baiting in action, which then led to the RSPCA and Four Corners and police raid in February. Chay, thanks for joining us. Were you surprised to find out about these mass greyhound burial sites?
Thanks, Tom. No, I must say we weren't really surprised. We've had plenty of reports over the years, and as we just heard, there's some 18,000 healthy dogs killed every year, so probably the next question is, what happens to all the rest?
Yeah, they're huge numbers, and it is really concerning for so many people. Why do you think this is happening?
It's all about profit and trying to find the quickest dog, and as we've seen through processes like live baiting and the dumping of these dogs, a lot of these trainers will do anything to win the prize money.
Yeah, right. Okay, I have Daniel Young on the line. He's the Chief Inspector for the RSPCA in Queensland, and he's working with the police in Queensland on the task force investigating the problems in the greyhound industry. Daniel, thank you for joining us. Since we found out about the site near Bundaberg, do you expect to find more?
Yeah, look, I don't think this is a one-off. We've certainly, as was mentioned before, we've received information over the years about what's happening, and there are a lot of dogs in the industry that are probably unaccounted for. So, yeah, I don't think this will be the only, unfortunately, the only scenario like this we'll come across.
Right, and what work is being done to actually find more of these sites and the perpetrators?
Look, as you mentioned before, a task force has been developed between RSPCA and Queensland Police Service, and we're looking at a number of different leads, and we still urge the public to come forward with any information. But yeah, they've got an active investigation going as we speak in relation to a number of different welfare concerns within the greyhound racing industry. Not only this and not only live baiting, but any animal welfare concerns are being looked at.
All right, we just heard Chay saying that basically this is a profit-driven industry that breeds dogs for that end alone, not for the welfare of these animals. And we've heard estimates of around 20,000 greyhounds being bred every year. Now, given that many of those don't end up on the racetrack, do you have any estimate as to the number of greyhounds that might be reaching an early death because of this industry?
Yeah, look, I'm probably not prepared to make a comment on the numbers, but obviously there are a large number of large volumes of animals that are no doubt being destroyed before they make it to the racing scene, unfortunately.
All right, great to speak to you there, Daniel. Thanks for joining us. On the text line, Lewis says it's a joke. People are jumping up in arms about nothing. This has been happening for decades. We really should be throwing our services towards something useful. Somebody else says animals aren't inanimate objects. This is effing disgusting. Jack in Canberra says, how many horses are killed each year because they're not fast enough? Well, there's a lot of people with concerns about the horse racing industry as well, Jack. In the studio with me, I have Chay Neal, the president of Animal Liberation Queensland. Chay, obviously, I know you'd like the industry shut down completely. That's probably not going to happen anytime soon. What do you think should be done in the short term?
If the industry isn't shut down in Queensland or around Australia, we certainly need to have an end to self-regulation, which clearly hasn't worked. And we need to see a lot more transparency, accountability, and we'd like to see an end to government subsidies going into the industry.
Okay, well, one of the other short-term solutions is adopting out these greyhounds, which happens on a reasonable scale. Clearly not enough because a lot of greyhounds are still dying. We have Lisa White on the phone with us, who is the president of Friends of the Hound, one of the biggest independent organisations that finds new homes for greyhounds. Lisa, what was it like for you to hear this news?
Well, shocking, but not surprising. As everyone has said, that this industry is responsible for breeding and the routine killing of thousands of dogs every year.
How do you know it's thousands?
Because the numbers say so. If, 20,000 dogs are bred every year. So that means over a 10-year period, you're looking at 200,000 greyhounds that have been bred. Even the most popular breed of animal only breeds less than 4,000 or 5,000. There's just nothing that can be done with that volume of dogs. What is going to happen to them? Where are the dogs? Our volunteer non-profit group rehomed 201 greyhounds last year, and we're dealing with the best of the trainers, the ones that do seek an alternative outcome for their animals. What is going to happen to the rest of them? We know that they're just routinely killed and discarded when they're no longer profitable.
So there's no way that all of those dogs could be adopted to new caring homes?
No, absolutely no way.
All right. Well, one person who's trying to do their fair share is Catherine from the Hunter Valley, who's called in. Catherine, you've adopted 3 greyhounds.
Yes, we have 2 beautiful black and white greyhounds, and our third one is actually a greyhound cross Irish wolfhound, which was a product of an accidental breeding, and he and his sister were actually about to be drowned by a volunteer at a kennel.
Oh, wow.
Luckily enough, she was a wonderful human being and had the heart to contact Greyhound Rescue New South Wales. And luckily, our beautiful boys are now living at home beautifully on the couch, just chilling out, sleeping, watching TV, and having a great life the way that dogs should, not in cages, not in crates, and not being forced to run for money of greedy human beings.
So how did that situation play out that you found dogs that were about to be drowned? Had they just been rescued from people in the racing industry, or were they still with people in the racing industry? How did that happen?
They still were with people in the greyhound racing industry. Luckily, there are a few honest trainers and owners, and of course kennel hands that don't want to see these dogs being put to sleep unnecessarily. They are doing the right thing, putting their hand up and contacting rescue groups, then surrendering their dogs. This is a very, very small percentage of the animals that are actually coming out of the racing industry, not to mention the puppies that never actually make the racing industry as well. One of my very good friends who is a very, 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 very hard-working volunteer at Greyhound Rescue New South Wales has actually adopted a puppy who doesn't have a paw. She came with an injury that they said was a damaged toe. When they actually removed the bandage, there was no paw there whatsoever.
Yeah, well, there's obviously a lot of mistreatment going on. You've heard the news in the last couple of days about these mass graves, many greyhounds being killed. What do you think should change in the short term?
In the short term, there has to be some sort of external regulation, as we've said before. They proved that they can't regulate themselves. They cannot be trusted. They don't provide the correct information to the public or even to themselves. We need to have a government body or someone external that monitors what they're doing, making sure that a proper rehoming program is actually in place. At the moment, Greyhound Racing New South Wales is proud of the fact that they've rehomed, I think, about 150 dogs last year. Maybe not even that many compared to rescue groups that are they're saving thousands of dogs around the country.
There's a massive gap there, obviously. Catherine, great to speak to you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much for being a voice for these beautiful animals. They need every voice they can get. Thank you.
All right. And Lisa White, great to speak to you as well. Thank you so much for joining us. And I think a lot of people would wish you well in keeping up the good work in rehousing these greyhounds.
Thanks, Tom.
And Chay, thank you so much for joining us as well from Animal Liberation Queensland. It'll be interesting to see how this story continues to develop and hopefully for the welfare of these animals, some positive changes.
Let's hope so. Thanks, Tom.
All right, on the text line, gambling on animals is morally wrong. Somebody else says, Tom, ban greyhound racing and its entire industry altogether. Greyhound racing in particular is an industry for lowlives and as such will attract lowlives and scumbags from top to bottom. It's time to evolve with the times, Ed in Arncliffe. Someone else says, mass graves are horrifying, but is there any evidence they were put down inhumanely? The real issue is that they were all buried in one spot. Isn't that it was all buried in one spot, but rather how they were killed. And I believe there is some evidence that some of their skulls were crushed, which would intimate that they weren't put down humanely in all cases. Somebody else says, I feel there are better topics to be talking about. Someone else says, we need tougher penalties for these murderers.
You're listening to Triple J Hack.